Previously on Ship Updates. And all that. And here I was facing off against a pirate cutlass. Now, this is, of course, an NPC. This is not a player cutlass. So performance and results may vary in those two departments. But I was kind of, okay, gonna go in, gonna fight him because he's shooting at me. And I was, kind of getting myself into that mode because I was used to these guys lasting just a little bit longer. It 3-shot a pirate cutlass. Like boom, boom. And just as I was getting the notice that my weapons overheated, and I kind of went like, uh-oh, my weapons are overheating, the cutlass just evaporated. And I just, oh. And so if you get the ship, or if you have the ship and you're flying around in combat against the smaller, weaker opponents, this thing kind of just erases them. So against weaker opponents, that is something that you're gonna have to get accustomed to, and it's not a bad thing to get accustomed to, but as I was flying combat missions, and by the way, the reason why I'm missing a nacelle is because Quantum dropped me right on top of an asteroid and I bounced off of it. But one of the things you're gonna have to get used to in combat is boom, gone. Drake Buccaneer, bye-bye. It does that, and that combined with the potential of the stealth systems of the ship mean that, yep, erased. It means that there could be some interesting combat potential with the ship, with the firepower and the ability to carry people and the ability to carry weapons, armor, equipment, though I think at a reduced capacity compared to other ships out there. There is a strong potential here. When the game, I think that So, I'm checking comments on YouTube, and I see this comment in regards to the Prowler, and it's like, help minion, I think they nerfed the Prowler, my guns are overheating, and I kind of went back and I was like, well, I think I kind of remember that problem. I believe that was actually a thing with the original Prowler. So I went back and I rewatched my original video, or at least a portion of it, just trying to find the combat portion. And yeah, I did say that I think it was like 3 shots shooting at a cutlass, and the ship, like the guns were starting to overheat. And to be perfectly honest, when you're looking at the Prowler, I don't think that something like that is unreasonable, if that is indeed still the case. Like, I don't own the Prowler. It's certainly not a daily driver for me. So, I mean, I'll be honest, I've always been highly suspicious of this ship. A stealth dropship for $425 is not something that I'm too excited by. It's something that I would be very suspicious of, especially when it was performing in combat the way that it was performing. And it was performing against smaller ships like fighters and cutlasses, at least. It was really strong, and that made me very suspicious of the ship. And I mean, this kind of goes back to the long-term MMO player kind of mindset. And when something is really strong, when something is really performing well, some people be like, oh yeah, this is the time to buy it. Long-term MMO players know that that's when you start to worry, because the hit is coming. So, I mean, I feel that a ship like that with that capability would probably eventually get some kind of an adjustment. Has one occurred? I really haven't paid attention. I'll be honest with you. This is a ship that kind of crossed my radar and then crossed right off my radar. I was hoping for more, not in terms of the ship, but in terms of the game, because I do feel that the Prowler is a ship that's ahead of its time in terms of Star Citizen being really ready to kind of fully flesh out this ship. It doesn't really do anything if you hit the stealth button, at least back then. It feels like a ship that is meant for a game that is much further along in terms of development, in terms of systems, than Star Citizen currently is. it's a cool ship, but it feels like it's kind of a waste Star Citizen being in the state that it is. Yeah, you could honestly, you could say that about a few ships. You could say that about the Reclaimer and the Herald, definitely. But when ships perform that strongly, that's, it's not like, hey, rejoice. It's a dominant heavy fighter. It's like, hey, you better be worried, because that's maybe a little too strong and you might get hit with the Nerf bat. And that's one of the things that, when I kind of make these videos and I talk about ships, I don't really focus too much on what size the guns are. I kind of look at more like, does it work? Does it make sense? Is it laid out well? Is it easy to land? Does it, is it resilient enough? These sorts of things are the things that I kind of look at. What's the layout like? Is the cockpit terrible? And the cockpit issue is something that has plagued CIG for years, because CIG designs aesthetics first, functionality second. And those are the things that you really should be concerned with when you're buying a ship. Now, when you're buying an alien dropship for $425, you really got to kind of examine that very, very carefully. Yeah, it's a cool looking ship, absolutely, no debate there. Certainly not the first time I saw it, but you can't just kind of go, oh, it's a cool looking ship, so therefore it's going to be great in the game. And we've seen that that's not really always the case. I mean, certainly the Glaive, when the Glaive first came out, it's like, oh my god, that's such a cool fighter. It's gonna wreck. It's got blades that shoot out of the front of it. And so when was the last time you saw a Glaive in game? Despite how popular it was, and like the people on the forums having absolute meltdowns because they did Vandal Swarm and somehow they didn't get the badge and they weren't able to buy it on time, and they were just freaking the F out. And then those of us that did have the Glaive, myself included, found that it really wasn't that good of a fighter at the time. I mean, it may have gone through some changes. It's certainly getting a visual update that I'm not all that keen on. I kind of prefer the original version with some minor color changes over the new. But yeah, when things got this kind of a price tag attached to them, they seem a little too good to be true. Generally, that's a pretty strong warning signal. With the Prowler, there's a lot of cool features, and certainly if you're stealth orientated, if this is the gameplay that you're after in Star Citizen, whether it's the Saber or the Ghost or whatever, this ship or the Talon or whatnot, yeah, you're gonna get some use out of it. Yeah, you're gonna get some enjoyment out of it. $425 worth of enjoyment over a span of years, perhaps. But truthfully, it is just a dropship with no cargo in it, and it was definitely never marketed as the heavy fighter. I mean, when we were going back and we were talking about the Talon and the Shrike, I would like to see a version of this that has kind of like a lot of the crap in the inside kind of pulled out, and see it realized as a as a bespoke heavy fighter. I think that would have been a lot cooler than the Talon and the Shrike, but it is what it is. What happens is what happens, and we just have to deal with the aftermath, right? But yeah, when you're out there buying ships, look for solid ships. Look for ships that you're really going to get a lot of mileage out of. $450 or $425, sorry, for a niche ship is not really good value for your money, especially when you figure that for just a hair over half the price, you can get a Corsair, which is twice the ship this is. Easily twice the ship this is. Right? There'll be plenty of time in game to earn money and buy stuff like this. But if you set yourself up with the right ships in the beginning, then buying something like this in game is going to be trivial for you. Now you might be sitting there and saying, no, you don't understand. I'm a member of stealthops.org, and we're all about stealth ops. I need to have a stealth ship. Not really. I mean, if you really think about it, the previously mentioned Corsair, all you would really have to do is run it with a lower SIG or park it further away and then proceed in on space bikes, which are, I think the Drake Dragonfly is still the stealthiest vehicle you can have in the game. You can proceed in on those, take out your target, and then get out on the bikes, get back on your ship, and fly away. And the Corsair is going to better set you up for life in for the broader life in the persistent universe than this ship ever would. This is kind of a niche prestige item. It's not something that you really, unless you're like a ship collector or something like this is nothing that you really need to get immediately. I know the feeling of seeing something really cool and then going like, oh my god, is this going to be the last chance that I get to get it at this price or whatnot, and that panic buy. And CIG certainly does take advantage of those panic buyers, but you really do, at some point, you really have to sit down and ask yourself the tough questions when ships come up and say, do I really need this? Is this something that I really need in my hangar right now, today? And the truth is the Prowler is just not in any way one of those ships. There's really nothing to the Prowler right now that another ship can't do, with some modification or some minor change to your tactics. That's pretty much the brutal truth of it. In the future, it may become more useful for certain things, but in the future, you'll be able to earn it in game easily. So, yeah, that's kind of why I warn against ships like this. There's a lot of cool features in them, but ultimately, they're all sizzle and no steak, right? The game being in the state that it is right now. In the future, there might be a little bit more meat on your plate, but right now, So, the good news is if you're kind of looking at the ship in your hangar and you're thinking, yeah, it was a really cool idea, but, I do kind of want to set myself up a little bit better, or, I melted a few things to get this and now I kind of regret it. The good news is we do have an anniversary sale come up, and that's usually when we as players tend to take a good hard look at our hangar and do a reshuffle and get rid of the sizzle and just go for the steak.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.